About 15 years doing everything under the sun, owning my own gym, consultation. For the past 5 years, I've been doing content development, so YouTube videos, article writing, things of that nature. I have my master's in exercise science, a bunch of high-level certs, CSCS, CASSN. I've been published in some scholarly articles, and I've been doing this for quite a while. Today, I wanted to talk about fat loss. I think in the world today, if you're on social media, like people can make it like very complicated. Um, I think too complicated. I think I tell my clients like the mechanisms of fat loss are pretty complicated, right? We'll see some of the processes that happen and they're 30 steps for like one, uh, process. But when you get to like the application is pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple. But I think it's good to understand what's actually going on internally to understand why you do what you do to lose weight. Um, Obviously, currently now, and obesity is on the rise. America, I'm American. About 70% of our population are either overweight or obese. So where that's one of the highest in the world. But even worldwide, it's about 50% of the population is overweight or obese. As we know, obesity is predicate of a ton of different health concerns, different chronic diseases, uh, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, various cancers, various respiratory conditions, a whole slew of stuff. From research, it's hard to say like exactly how many deaths um, obesity is directly responsible for because there's so many different variables going on. But it's estimated about 10% of deaths are directly related to obesity. And then on top of that, even if you maybe you don't die, um, if you don't die early, you still have diseases, and so like the quality of life is down. So even if you don't hit that mortality, that life before when you're in chronic diseases, whether it's cancer or diabetes, it decreases the quality of life quite significantly. And I think it's it's completely it's highly preventable. So that's why I talk about it so much. So whenever I start talking about fat loss, the first thing I like to start with is talking about like why do we gain fat? Like why do we have fat on us? Kind of like reverse engineering. If you look at a rocket ship, and I can't, but engineers, they can go look at a rocket ship and they can look at it and they can kind of reverse it and make it. And so we first need to ask ourselves, like, why do we gain fat? Like, what's the purpose of it? Um, if it causes so much trouble, why does our body allow us to do that? Um, I can say, why do we gain muscle? We gain muscle, if you heard my speeches, because when we put stress on our muscle, we grow stronger, bigger muscles. That's advantageous for us, right? So why do we gain fat? Um, the primary reason is that fat is our body's primary source of fuel. I know a lot of times we hear like carbohydrates, carbs give us fuel. Um, that's not entirely true. Um, we'll talk about this a little later on. But carbs provide energy for like fast energy when we need for like high intensity activities, sprinting, lifting weights. However, carbs are stored in our muscles and our liver, and it's highly finite, meaning we only have a limited supply. Most people only maybe have about 4 hours of energy stored in their muscles, right? So like that 4 hours is not that much time. And then we compare that with, say, our fat, right? Everyone, we virtually have an unlimited supply of fat stores on us. So in reality, fat is a good thing. Over the years, we heard of, fats kind of had a negative connotation, especially if you're growing up in the 90s. But fat's actually very, very good. We would die if we did not have fat on us. As you can see, it was like an evolutionary advantage. If we weren't able to store fat, now we can eat food whenever we want. There's McDonald's on the corner. Go to the grocery store. You can call Grab or your delivery service. It's very easy to get food now. However, thousands of years ago, we didn't have that. We didn't have refrigeration. And so I call it like fat is like our evolutionary doggy bag. So if you go to a restaurant and you eat food, you can put that extra leftover and take it away with you, right? Thousands of years ago, you couldn't do that. And so what fat did, it allowed us to eat a large amount of food. And then if we didn't, hunt anytime soon, that extra energy would be stored in our body. And so you see like right here. So right here, these guys are hunting ducks and stuff. Maybe fish and ducks you can kill easy. It's not that much food. However, let's say you go kill a big elk. Instead of like letting this go to waste, your body can store it for later. So maybe you don't eat again for 5 days or something like that. And so that's why we gain fat. Again, the problem is that in today's world, we have so many choices for food. Whether, like I said, fast food, delivery service, what have you. At the same time, our lives have become much more sedentary with driving cars, even work. Even like 100 years ago, people were working in factories and on their feet, all that stuff. Now, a lot of jobs, like 60%, are office jobs. So we're sitting down, we're eating, and what once was a like evolutionary advantage has now turned into a like it's killing us now because we haven't can we our bodies haven't adapted to the sedentary lifestyles we have. So we're gonna go down and talk about the foods. Like obviously we don't eat fat, so like where does that fat come from? How does it get stored on us? So as you can see here, let me move this. We have our three macronutrients. We have our carbs. There's like your bread, rice, fruit, things of that nature, wheat, grains. You have proteins. This is your meat, chicken, fish, steak, cheese, eggs, all that good stuff. And then over here you have, the fat, the nutrient fat. That's your oils, things of that nature. All of these, when we eat these, our body will digest them down to their nutrient base, and then those will go and do different jobs that we're going to talk about. So carbohydrates will basically get broken down to glucose, fats will get broken down to fatty acids and stored, and proteins will be broken down to amino acids. Amino acids are the building blocks of protein. So, yeah. So when we eat fat, our body will break that down into a compound known as fatty acids. That's right here. You can see here. Have you ever heard like a triglyceride? You've probably heard that before, triglyceride levels. What a triglyceride is it's three of these fatty acids plus a glycerol. Okay. So you eat the fat, it digests it down into fatty acids. Fatty acids combine with the glycerol, and that turns into a triglyceride right here. Then what happens with that? These triglycerides are shuttled into fat cells. These are known as, I never pronounce it very well, so bear with me, an adipocyte. And basically, these are fat cells, as you can see right here. So this is a whole cell that we call a fat cell. This is what's like in your stomach. When you see people that are fat, this is what it is. And then right here, this is where the triglycerides are stored. So here's the cell, and then the triglycerides, what we call fat. The fat is stored right here in this fat reserve. And then when all these cells get together, You have fat. So this is what we store on our body. This is what it is. So again, you have fat, you eat it, you eat fat, it breaks it down to fatty acids. These fatty acids go through transformation, they join with the glycerol, it changes, turns into triglyceride. Then triglyceride is shuttled into your fat cell where it's stored right here and accumulates. So this is important. We'll talk about it a little bit later too. When we lose fat and gain fat, this cell, we don't lose the cell. Okay. What we do is the fat that is held inside the cell right here is excreted. Okay. It's shot out and it's used for later. So these cells, when we lose fat, what they do is they like decrease, but we don't actually burn this fat cell, which is one of the reasons. I'm not sure if you've ever heard someone talk about like once you gain a lot of weight, it can make it harder to lose weight. Um, and one of the reasons you can lose weight, but you might not have that great body composition because you never actually lose these. So you still have these stored. So once you gain these, you can't really get rid of them. There's some research going on right now where maybe we can, but generally that's the idea. You build these fat cells because again, your body's doing this for evolution. You're like, body's like being stored with a ton of food, and your body's like, I don't want to waste this, right? I want to hold on to this. And so it creates more of these fat cells, and the fat is stored inside. So while fat, the nutrient fat is the obvious nutrient that we think about, gaining fat. Like I mentioned, we can gain fat from any of the three nutrients. Our body is ridiculously smart. It can take nutrients from wherever, and it has all these different processes, and it can convert different compounds into the compounds it needs. So like there's no way you can get around it. So with carbs, when you eat carbs, it's broken down into glucose. If you've heard, blood sugar, that's glucose. That's a singular compound of sugar. This enters into your bloodstream, and that's what's going around and around in your blood. And this glucose is what's used for energy through carbs. However, when you eat a lot of food, let's say you go eat whatever, you're at a feast, your body's breaking down all these carbs and everything, and it causes a spike in glucose. So this blood sugar right here shoots up. What happens then is if you have high blood sugar, your body's going to have a negative reaction. This is what happens. This is what can happen with people with diabetes. They can get very high blood sugar levels. They get dizzy, confused, things of that nature. So to prevent that, beta cells in your pancreas are released. It releases insulin. And what insulin does is insulin triggers your body to uptake that glucose, and it puts it into your muscle where it stores it as glycogen. Okay, so you have blood glucose going around in your blood. You eat a lot of food. It causes too much glucose to be in your blood. So to prevent a high to maintain those blood levels, insulin is released, and that glucose, that extra glucose, is then absorbed up into your muscles where it's stored as muscle glycogen. So, so this is a little picture. So right here, you come down, insulin's released. It stimulates the glucose uptake, and it's stored up in your muscles. And then this can also reverse. We're not going to talk about that right now. But this is what happens, okay? So you have glycogen, glucose. From glycogen, it goes into your muscles, and it's stored there. And like I said in the very beginning, the problem with glycogen is it's great for fast energy. However, we have a very small amount stored in our bodies. I don't know if any of you are runners or track athletes or anything like that. if you've ever heard of, hitting the wall, we'll say hitting the wall when you're doing a marathon, generally around, mile 18, which is, kilometer, 28, 30. Most people, if they are new to running or they're going too hard, they'll hit the wall. And what that means is they've burned through all of their glycogen, and now their body doesn't have that easy access of energy. And so it's interesting if you were to talk to different runners and ask them if you hit the wall, if they say yes, ask them what mile or what kilometer do you hit the wall? And it's almost always the same. It's either mile 18 to 20 or kilometers. That's what, like 30, something like that, like 30. And that's because most people's bodies are pretty similar. We kind of proportional, our bodies store the same amount of glycogen. However, if you think about it, running 20 miles, 18 miles, that's only 3 hours of work, 2 hours of work. It's not that much. Um, so glycogen, your muscle, there's two places in your body where you hold glycogen. Again, that's to store carbs. One is your muscle. Depending on the person, that can be anywhere between 300 to 600 grams. Generally, it's more around 400, 500. And that's your main storage. But then your liver also holds, smaller amount, about 100 to 120 grams. So the issue with this is it's not that much. So what happens when your glycogen stores are full? Okay, it's very small. So what happens when your glycogen stores are full, but you keep eating and your body has all this extra glucose and sugar? It can't sit in your blood. So what happens to it? Where does it go? So again, like I was saying before, put this over here, it's my way. Your body will take that glucose and it will convert it into the fatty acids like we talked about. Let me get this out of the way. That's really annoying. All right, sorry. So your body will, it's called de novo lipogenesis. Remember in the very beginning when I said the mechanisms are very complex? So this is what I was talking about. We're not going to go over this, but this is what the entire process looks like. And this is just this one process. This is when your body is taking glucose, the extra glucose, and then converting it into fatty acids. It's I want to say 11 different steps just for that one thing. So again, it's very complex, but you don't need to know that to understand how fat loss works. So again, you eat too much, eat too much, storage full, your body turns glucose into fatty acids. And then after that, the fatty acids go back over here, goes into glycerol, triglyceride, and it's stored as fat. And then the same thing can happen with protein. It's a lot harder to do. It's a lot more difficult process, but it can happen. Um, your body will break it down and it can turn in this process known as lipogenesis. It's much harder. We're not going to really speak about it too much because most people aren't eating that much protein anyways. Um, but the major takeaway is that no matter what you're eating, whether it's fat, whether it's protein, whether it's carbs, whatever it is, if you're eating too much, too many calories, your body is going to find a way and it's going to store that and it stores it in your stomach. So when you eat too much for too long, you get obese, and that's when you have issues. So that's how we gain fat. So let's talk about like how do we lose fat. So one thing people don't understand is we talk about calories. However, our body doesn't use calorie. Our body uses calories to produce what's called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Okay. Um, this is going to be important in a little bit. This occurs if you ever heard of our metabolic systems. We have 3 different metabolic systems. And what these metabolic systems do is they take those nutrients, those calories, and they all convert calories, which are, kind of like potential energy, and then it converts it into ATP, usable energy. Okay. So what that means is when you eat calories, your body can't directly, my muscle can't use calories directly. It has to take those calories, the nutrients, and convert that into ATP. So you have three different systems. We're going to go through this pretty quickly, I think. ATP, CP, glycolysis, and oxidative. Um, ATP, we're not going to speak about this at all. This is a very fast process. It occurs very, very quickly. It doesn't really have anything to do with your nutrients. If you've heard of creatine, we've talked about that before. Creatine, it produces ATP with creatine, but it doesn't really have much to do with carbs or fat or anything like that. So we're not going to talk about that. Ba, ba, ba. So, but glycolysis. So glycolysis is a system that occurs when there's no oxygen present. This occurs during high intensity activity, 30 to 120 seconds. So maybe you're running like a 400 meter, something like that. What it does is it takes the glucose, remember the glucose from up here, down here, takes that glucose. There's a process known as glycolysis. And that glycolysis right here turns into two pyruvates and then two ATP over here. And your body can then use these two ATP compounds later for muscular contractions, anything like that. But again, this occurs with like the carbohydrates in your system, and this is again is the process. Um, and there's another one. It's called slow glycolysis aerobic. It's the same exact process as here. However, in the fast glycolysis, it creates these two compounds of pyruvate. When there's no oxygen present, these pyruvate is converted into lactic acid. If you've ever heard of lactic acid, that's what can cause like buildup of fatigue. That's what that's from. And then this lactic acid is shuttled in for another process. Again, we're not going to talk about that. However, the slow glycolysis, it's the same thing, except now there's oxygen present. So this is like slower running. Now that pyruvate is sent into the mitochondria. It's that's converted into acetyl CoA, and then that's converted into the Krebs cycle right here. And then there's one more, the oxidative system, which is the same. It's very similar, but there's four systems involved. This is using more of your fat. There's four systems: aerobic glycolysis, beta oxidation, Krebs cycle, and electron transport. All these are going to produce ATP. So again, I'm not going over this too much because don't have a ton of time and they're a lot more complicated. But there's an important reason why I wanted to kind of illustrate this, that our bodies don't directly use calories. No matter what it is, your calories will take that and turn it into ATP. Your body has to have ATP to um, to function. We call it your body's cellular currency. Your body can't work without it. And why that's important is because a lot of time, for some reason, some people will say like calories don't matter, calories are important, things like that, and they very much are because those calories are what form ATP. So if you don't have calories, you don't have ATP, you don't have function, and you're going to be in a world of hurt. So, so far we've talked about like the nutrients your body takes: carbs, fat, protein. When you eat them, when you eat too much, or when you eat them, it goes through all these different processes. And if you eat too much, it converts them and it stores them as fat. So, how do we lose fat now? So we know how like your fat can store. you've probably heard of a process called calories in, calories out. What this is, it's a very simplistic manner to explain like fluctuations in our weight. So it basically says calories consumed minus calories expended equals change in weight. Okay. So you have three possibilities. You eat more you eat more than you spend. Okay. So calories consumed, calories expended, surplus, meaning you're eating too much. What's going to happen? You're going to gain weight. Now let's say your calories consumed are less than what you expend. Now you're going to have a deficit. So now you're burning more of those calories. Now you're going to have weight loss. But let's say the calories you consume are the same amount as the calories you burn. Now you're going to maintain weight. Okay? But this is the very basic foundation of weight loss. A lot of people, again, they will try to overcomplicate this and say there's different things that don't matter. Maybe you have slow metabolism or things of that nature. However, none of those things negate the fact that if you eat more than you burn, you're going to gain weight. And if you eat less than you burn, you're going to lose weight. Again, this is why this part is so important because you see, the whole reason we gain weight, gain fat, is because we're eating too much, right? Um, I was having a conversation with a man. He was trying to say that calories don't matter, and uh, he was saying calories in, calories out is a myth, and it doesn't work. And I said, no one denies that if you eat too much, you gain weight, right? Everyone agrees if you eat too much, you gain weight. However, when you start saying if you eat less, you lose weight, now people try to make it too complicated and they start saying, oh, well, there's this hormone and there's this disease and there's this and there's this. And now there's all these different kind of issues that they try to say it doesn't really make sense. And it does. You eat calories, too many calories, you're going to gain weight. Then you burn it. Okay. Remember the whole reason we hold on the fat is to burn it, right? We don't hold it just because. The reason we hold on the fat is so our bodies can burn it for later use. Um, and that simple concept is not talked about very often. I think it's like a key factor because now again in the fitness industry and Instagram, there's people kind of denying calories in, calorie out, and that just doesn't make any sense because we the only reason our body holds onto it is so that we can burn it. It doesn't just hold on to it just because, right? It would just get rid of it if it wanted to. So keep that in mind. Um, but like, what is a calorie? So we've known about this for a very long time too. We've known what calories are for 150 years or so. There's a doctor named Dr. Wilbur Atowar. He was like the father of nutrition science, and he basically had this whole laboratory. And this is way back in the late 1800s. Um, Again, here's his colleague, and they're measuring calories, and they were doing this like 150 years ago. Um, this whole system, and he had uh, identified what a calorie was, and he was only one of the first people. He said that to lose weight, he said the population has been influenced too much by taste, and that we should regulate appetite by reason. So basically, he was saying that people are now eating too much. We're eating out of joy rather than eat out of necessity. We're eating um, out of enjoyment and out of gluttony. And he saw that this was causing an issue. And there's another lady, Dr. Lulu Hunt Peters. So that she was like one of the first female scientists. Well, she's just one of the first female scientists in general, right? But then she was also one of the very first scientists who actually, we have evidence of like actually counting calories. If you've heard of like calorie counting, she's one of the first ones who actually did it. And this is her book, um, Diet and Health with Key to the Calories. And so, again, they understood this concept. And not only did they understand the concept, they actively used it with themselves and all of their clients. Like she's one of the first ones who tracked her weight loss, and she lost 70 pounds over the course of tracking her calories in, calories out. Um, Again, why I'm reiterating this is because it comes down to calories in, calories out. You might hear people overcomplicate it. There's nuance, but this is going to be the main foundation of weight loss. So, like, what is a calorie? It's basically, earlier I talked about ATP is energy that our body can use. Calorie is, it's basically a heat source. It's held in food. Okay, um, that's all it is. It's a way that we measure heat, and it's stored in food. So that's what a calorie is. So how many calories are in food? So not all foods have the same amount of calories in them. Um, Again, going up to those macronutrients, the protein, the fat, the carbohydrates. Um, so 1 gram of protein has 4 calories. 1 gram of fat has 9 calories, so it's twice as much. This is why some people got, bad. They say, oh, it's too high in calories. That's not the case. This is good. Again, this is good. This is why our bodies store fat and doesn't store carbohydrates, because fat has twice as much energy, right? See, when you start changing your mindset, the way you look at these things, it starts making sense. If your body had to use carbohydrates, it'd have to store twice as many grams, right? That's kind of crazy. You think about it. Um, let's say you have 20 pounds of fat on you, right? If those were carbohydrates, you'd have to store an extra 40, 50 pounds of carbohydrates on you. So that's good. This is why it's so energy dense. Um, but anyway, so this is how like we would count our calories. So let's say your diet has 150 grams of protein. 1 gram is 4 calories, so that's 600 total calories. Now fat. Again, fat has 9 calories. 100 grams of fat would be 900 calories. And let's say carbs. You're doing 200 grams of carbs. 1 gram has 4 calories. 200 times 4 is 800 calories. Total calories. 600 plus 900 plus 800 is 2,300 calories. So that is the basic, and that's as simple as it is when we're talking about counting calories. But this is what we mean when we're saying, 1,800 calorie meal plan, 2,500 calorie meal plan. This is how it's formed with these numbers. So how are calories expended? So there's 4 different ways that we can burn calories throughout the day. It's called your TDEE, total daily energy expenditure. So the first is going to be your BMR. The BMR is basically, these are the calories you burn to support basic life function. So respiration, brain function, all that stuff. Then you have thermal effective food. I'm not going to tell, we'll talk about that when we get there. Then you have 2 different types of activity: exercise, aerobic thermogenesis, eat. And this is exercise, like sports, running, lifting weights. And then non-exercise, neat. So this things like walking, kitchen, chore work, walking to your car, things of that nature. So your BMR has the biggest chunk of your calories. It's about 60 to 70% of your TDEE. Um, Again, there's different formulas you can use to find it, but it's a very large chunk. About 60 70% of your total calories burned are from this. So even if you just lay down all day. Uh, Now your thermal effect of food, like we were talking about, most people is about 10%. But what this is the amount of body calories your body needs to burn a certain food. Um, So it means like when you eat a food, your body has to digest it, it has to absorb it, it has to transfer the nutrients, and it has to expel it. All of that takes calories, right? Protein has the highest TEF, 20 to 30%. What this means is if you eat 100 calories, you're going to burn 20 to 30 calories just eating it. So right here, this example, 300 calories of protein, you're only going to absorb 225 calories. Carbs is about 10 to 15%. So if you eat 300 calories of carbs, you're going to absorb 270 calories. Fat has the lowest TEF. If you eat 300 calories of fat, you're gonna absorb 294 calories. But we're gonna talk about this. This is why high protein. This is one of the reasons high protein diets are very good for weight loss. And then total daily energy expenditure. This is exercise. It's actually pretty small for most people. It's only about 5 to 10%. Um, People, we don't burn as much calories as we think we do when we go to the gym. Most people, it's not that. It's only about 5 to 10% for most people. Again, this is why controlling your calories, your nutrition is so important. And then non-exercise aerobic thermogenesis, this can be 15 to 30%. There's a lot of variance here. Um, have you ever heard, 10,000 steps, get your steps in, 10,000 steps, all that good stuff? That's kind of what this is talking about. And this is really important because we're kind of grown up, thinking like we always have to like hardcore intense. We got to run and lift weights and do all this stuff to burn calories. Like we don't. That's obviously good and we should do that. But just walking, going to the beach, taking your dog for a walk, cycling around the park, all that burns a lot of calories. Um, I can tell myself when I'm like working in the gym, training people, I'll burn 1,500 calories just from walking around and helping people out. And then when I go and I have a day of just writing, like I can gain weight really fast from writing just because I'm not moving around and stuff. So 10,000 steps. This is a good number. But again, get that in your mind. You don't have, when people say, oh, I don't have time, you don't have to go to the gym. You don't have to run. I mean, I think you should, but getting out, going out of the house, getting off your feet, you can get on your feet. All that stuff builds up and it can have a massive effect. Again, most people it's 15 to 30%. And compare that to exercise, it's only 5 to 10%. So it's significantly more. So, how do you lose weight? One, concentrate on whole foods. I'm gonna go to this right now. So, processed foods, natural food. This is what's killing us. Um, Again, when we want to lose weight, we can eat less and burn more calories, right? So that's the ideal. Um, but if you eat more and then you burn more, it's going to equal out, right? So you have to focus on doing both. You need to eat less and then burn more, and that's going to optimize it. However, we eat so much processed foods now in our diets that the average person is eating in excess of 1,000 calories a day, 1,500, and we're not going to be able to lose weight doing that. Um, for one, they don't have the minerals and vitamins. Okay, we're at least in the Western world, we're simultaneously like obese, but we're malnourished at the same time. A lot of times when we think about malnourished, we think about like starving and not eating food. That's true, but malnourished means you're not getting the proper amount of, it's not the calories necessarily, but it's not getting the proper amount of minerals and vitamins. That's what makes you can make you malnourished as well. And so if you're eating all of this stuff, even though you might be eating excess and you're gaining weight, you're still missing out on the vitamins and the minerals. And so you can be malnourished at the same time, which is it's kind of weird to think about that, but it's a big problem in America. So not only you're gaining weight, now you don't have the proper, now your immune system's dropping because you don't have the proper vitamins. Your bones are getting weak because you don't have the proper vitamins. And so it's just this compounding effect. At the same time, this doesn't have a satisfying effect. If you ever eat like an Oreo and like an egg, um, they have similar amounts of calories in them, right? But if you're sitting down, you could probably go eat 10 Oreos if you're not being careful. If you're watching TV, watching movies, you could pop Oreos, right? Because it doesn't have that satisfying effect. But an egg, one egg is very, like you eat one egg, hard boiled egg, it's very filling. There's no way you're going to eat 10 of them, right? That's crazy. However, the egg and Oreo have the same amount of calories in them. And so when you're eating all this, you're eating excess of food, you're not getting full, and you're missing out on minerals and nutrients. There's a study where a guy had basically he had these two groups of people, and he told them, like, here's processed food, here's unprocessed foods, and said, like, eat how you feel, right? And they did that for a couple of weeks, and then they switched positions. Both groups, when they ate the ultra processed when they ate the processed foods, they ate anywhere between 500 to 1,000 extra calories. Not even on purpose, not trying. They just did it naturally. So we'll call it like 80-20 diet. This is basically 80%, get 80% of your natural food from whole foods. 20% you can mess around here, right? But if you're getting 80% of this, one, you're gonna get your vitamins, you're gonna get your nutrients. But a lot of my clients, when I put them on this diet, they don't even have to count calories because they're so used to eating this. When they eat this, they get full so fast, right? And they don't even have to really start counting calories. If you've talked to some like, fitness gurus, they probably will tell you that they stop counting calories. They don't have to because they eat real food and their body kind of naturally tells them when it's enough to eat. Um, then you're going to need to get into a deficit. 300 to 500 calories is good for most people. 1,000 max for like people with a lot of weight. One, what can happen is your body can break down that muscle, right? Um, before I was saying your body, your body can, when your body's making that glucose, it's first going to turn to your glycogen, it's going to turn to your fatty acids, right? Um, However, it can break down your muscle. There's amino acids in your muscle. We don't want that to happen because if you get to amino acids, it needs to break down your muscle. And so that's how you start losing muscle. And this can happen when your deficit's too high. Uh, so this is why we usually say 300 to 500. At the same time, there's something that's called adaptive thermogenesis. Um, some people, they exaggerate this, but basically what this is when you start eating too less calories, especially if it's a big deficit, like 1,000 calories, your body is smart and it's going to adapt to that. Sometimes you'll hear people say like, oh, my metabolism's broken. Like it's not broken. It's your body's doing this to preserve energy. And what happens is here's your metabolism. Even if you continue eating the same calories, if it's too little, whoa, it's going to drop. So what that means is, let's say you're right here and you start dieting too much, and you keep going down. Now your metabolism's right here. If you go back onto a normal diet and you start eating these calories, now you're going to have this, you're going to be eating too much and you're going to gain weight, even though you're eating the same amount. So right here, your metabolism and calories are here equal, but you start eating too less, your metabolism drops, and then when you go back, you gain weight. So that's why I have some clients do what's called like adaptive thermogenesis. Um, intermittent calorie restriction. And basically what that is instead of doing, let's say you're doing 500 calories lost a day, a 500 caloric deficit a day. Instead of just doing that for a year straight or whatever it is, do it for like a month. Do it for 4 weeks, right? Do it for 4 weeks. And then after that, on that fifth week, bring it back up. Okay. Add a little bit more calories for about a week or so. And what that's going to do, it's going to prevent this from happening. Okay. It's going to prevent that drop. So you like decrease by 500, then come off your diet for a week. Don't eat too much. You just bring it back up. Then you do that again. And it's going to preserve your, we'll call that, assuming that's supposed to be REE. That's basically your BMR. There's been a bunch of studies, and they had two different. There's one study they had two groups of people. One group was doing this, just straight 500 caloric deficit every single day, and then another group was doing this, the adaptive. 500 for a week and then take a break. 500 for, 500 a day for a month and then take a break. Repeating that. This group, even though they took weeks off, they ended up losing more than the continuous. They lost more weight, they preserved muscle mass, and their BMR stayed the same. So they didn't get this. So there's a lot of new research coming on with this. It seems to be pretty highly effective. It allows you to burn calories, preserve your muscle mass, preserve your REE, and all that. Again, increase protein. So we had already talked about the TEF, okay? There's two other reasons. One, out of fat, carbs, and protein. Protein has like the highest satiety, which means like it makes you feel full. So if you think about if you eat like 100 calories of a banana or 100 calories of steak or chicken, right? That chicken is gonna keep you satisfied for a much longer time. Reason being is because protein is generally, chicken meat. That's harder for your body to break down. And so when you eat chicken, that goes into your digestive tract, and your body has to work longer to break it down. So it sits in your tract for a longer time and it keeps you feeling full. Compare that to like a banana or like oil. Okay. The fat's very low. If you eat oil, fat, your body doesn't even have to digest that. So it doesn't really do much. Carbs, bananas too. Yeah, it's mushy. But again, so you eat a lot of protein and it's going to keep you feeling full. We already talked about this. In addition to keeping like a minimal deficit, you can increase your protein to help mitigate the extra breakdown. Um, Amino acids are the building blocks of your muscle. And so when you eat, when you increase your protein intake, it's going to supply a lot more of the amino acids. And so when you're in that deficit, those extra amino acids can help preserve your muscle, can help, like save your muscle. So these are the three reasons high protein diets are very effective. To put this in consideration, say you have two diets. They're both at 2,500 calories, right? Both of them are eating the same amount of calories. However, this diet only gets 10% of their protein. Only gets 10% of their calories from protein. This this diet gets 35% of their diet from protein. Which of these diets is going to burn more fat? This diet. Okay. Even though they're eating the same amount of calories, this diet, because it's higher in protein, is going to have that higher TEF. So I recommend this a lot to all my clients. I don't really do a lot of diets, say Mediterranean, keto diet, anything like that. I don't really promote too many, but I do promote a high protein diet. So at least 2 grams per kilogram of body weight. If you're leaner, if you're already pretty lean, you could even go a little bit higher. Again, it's hard to give. It all depends on the person and everything. But for most people, when you're losing weight, I like to do 2 grams per kilogram of body weight. Um, and again, for a lot of people, if they're not used to this much protein is going to keep them feeling very, very full. And then obviously exercise. There's three parts, right? Again, for some reason, people like to talk about like either or, which one should I do? Like, you should do both of them. All three of them. Strength training is going to build or maintain your muscle mass. Cardio, say running, cycling, swimming, any of that stuff, that's going to burn calories and also improve your cardiovascular system. And then, again, that general activity. remember before, I think 8,000 steps is that's the general, most studies show people start like getting very positive benefits. But there's dose response all the way up to 20,000 steps. Again, a lot of times people look for like the minimum. Yeah, they say like, what's the minimum? And they always want to look at that lowest bit. That's here. But if you get 20,000 steps in, you're going to get a dose response up to that. So, all in a recap. So, right at the very beginning, I said all this stuff, this is all kind of confusing, right? This is all kind of like a lot of craziness, a lot of big words, a lot of different processes. But all that is recapped right here. Like that's all it. When I talk to my clients about what they actually need to do to lose weight, say get them to a 300, 500 caloric deficit, increase their protein, strength train to build muscle, and then increase their cardio and physical activity. That's going to increase their caloric burn. And then remember this fat cell. What happens is when you get into that deficit, your body is going to need that stored fat for fuel. And all the fat from here is going to be released out into your system. And it's going to go through this whole entire process again. Then you do that day after day. And that's how you lose fat. All this fat right here is going to be shot out because your body's going to need to use it. That cell is going to shrink. And then that is what is going to eventually result in fat loss. And so yeah, that's pretty much it. Again, it's kind of complicated, all this stuff, but the actual like what you need to do is actually all brought down into like a pretty simple, complex, simple system. All right. All right. Are there any questions?
As he said, we have 9 minutes of questions. So if you have any question and use the hand reaction or leave a comment in the chat. So we have one question from CC Jules. Let's see what he has to say.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay, my question is the chat box at the top. Please to re-explain the ETP on slide 19 or 20, I don't know, and the cycle schema of fat loss in slide 21. So fast. And the last is question share the presentation. Okay, that's all.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I wasn't gonna go over this too much because it's pretty complicated.
Yes.
So ATP is
Yeah.
adenosine triphosphate. ATP is what your body actually uses to fuel muscle contractions. When it stands for adenosine triphosphate, when your muscle needs energy to contract the muscle, this has three phosphates. One of these phosphates actually breaks off. And when that happens, that releases energy. But my main point with this, talking about ATP, is that your body takes calories and it uses those calories to produce ATP. Okay, so the nutrients and the calories that's then used to produce process ATP. Because a lot of times we say burning calories, burning. That's what's going on. Your body takes the calories, the nutrients, it converts that into ATP, and then your body actually uses the ATP to fuel muscle contractions, fuel processes, and stuff like that.
Mm. And the schema, the cycle, the fat loss cycle on the slide 21.
This so this is the cycle for glycolysis. This is how your body produces ATP from glucose. And this is going for ATP again. You have glucose that's in your blood. Excuse me. It goes through a process known as glycolysis, and this glycolysis is in what produces the ATP that's used for like the energy contractions, for like the muscle contractions and all that stuff. So again, this is all part of your three metabolic systems.
Okay, how can we weight the sugar to get the normal glucose in this cycle and get the lost weight normally?
What was that again? One more time?
Yeah, I repeat my question.
Yeah, yeah.
I say what because in the schema I got glucose. Glucose is based on everything for the loss, fat loss or fat gain. I don't know, but what quantity of sugar because this is based on the sugar you are consuming daily
Mhm.
daily basis. Okay, what quantity you recommend to people every day to
So,
maintain this fat loss?
so there's no specific number for fat loss. Um, if we, well, let me find it. It's right here.
Yes.
There's no specific amount of sugar or carbohydrates that you need to eat to lose fat. Um, you can lose fat for a variety with a variety of different mixtures of protein and fat and carbs.
Okay.
The primary outcome is the total number of calories that you're eating. With that said, I generally use like a third. I wasn't going to really go into diet so much. But I go into 30, 30, 40, which is, 30% protein, 30% fat, or 40% carbs. But you can switch that too. The primary the primary nutrient again is your fat. You need to be eating, 2 to 2.5 grams per kilogram of body weight.
Okay.
But as far as like the carbs, so I
Okay.
have some clients who work really well on very low carbs. I have some clients who work very well on like higher carbs. So that's kind of like dependent up to you. But whenever I have clients, I say 30% or 2 grams per kilogram of body of protein, and then you can kind of do what you want with these, depending on like what
That's
your diet looks like.
that's good. That's good.
Yep.
Okay, but my last question is the presentation of how you can share for us. Or we still need to refer to our student page in AIU. We cannot get it.
Oh, I think they are reviewing it, or they're videoing it.
or if we can straight get it here to
Yeah.
download is okay because
Yep.
it take time to go to the student page, so it will
Yep.
take time.
Hmm. All right.
If not, it was a good presentation. So for the healthy purpose and the fat
Yeah.
loss and gain, very, very good. I appreciate. Appreciate.
All right. Who has a question? Is it
And
better to?
we can answer. Yes,
Hmm?
please go ahead.
Someone was asking, is it better to space out, or should we eat it together? Um, I don't think it makes a massive difference. I think spreading it out is ideal. Um, Spreading it out is going to generally keep you fuller, but some people like doing what's called one meal a day. Um, Again, the your total calories is going to be the primary indicator. But if I had a choice, I'd say spread it out. Um, yeah.
We can answer three more questions that are raised hands. So let's see what Tadelek has to say.
All right. Yes.
Please unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you so much for presentation. I'm very happy. This is, I think, a big challenge today in the world we are facing. I have a question in relation to metabolism and calorie consumption. We see practically some people consume a lot of calorie, yet they don't gain weight. But others are very much restrict to themselves, try their best to lose, yet still keep gaining. So what is the difference? Why is this happening? If it
So,
is depending only on how much we eat.
so this is one of the things. So some people do naturally have a slower metabolism too. Meaning they naturally burn calories slower. Basically what that means. So what that means is sometimes people say, oh, that means it's calories in, calories out doesn't work. The thing is, like, it
Yes.
does work. It's just that your calories are going to have to be less, right? So I might be able to eat 3,000 calories, and you might have to eat 2,500 calories, right? Um, so at the same time, though, I would ask if you're counting your calories, because a lot of I've run into that quite a few times, and they'll say, like, yeah, I haven't been counting my calories, and then I ask them to do it, and it turns out they're eating a lot more than they think they are. Um, Most research shows that most people underestimate the amount of calories they eat by about 600 to 1,000 calories. It's quite significant because they're not counting maybe things they drink, maybe they don't count juice and things of that nature. So there could be a few different things, but one, there is, some people do have slower metabolisms, but three is, like, the person burning calories, like, is he a lot more active? There's a lot of other factors that go into it.
Mhm.
All right, who's next?
Mm, let's see, Balamusa.
Thank you very much. This Professor Garrett. Your presentation is very wonderful, and I repeat a request for a sharing of your presentation on chat now before class ends. But my question is, by simply eating one plate of food like rice, boiled rice, or fried rice with meat and fish, some mixed vegetables, I mean eggs and etc. How can one balance the intake of calories in that kind of a dish, in that kind of a diet?
Just eating one dish a day?
Yeah. No, at least for example, you take it in the afternoon lunch, and then in the night you take it, and breakfast you have something different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I tell you, so you're asking, like, how? So it depends where you're getting it from. If you're making it, by yourself, there's various tools online that will tell you, say how many calories are in rice, or how many calories are in chicken, or how many calories are in vegetables or potatoes or whatever it is. So you need to look at that and judge that to see, basically how much you're eating. Um, Again, though, I find that when a lot of people are eating, like, whole foods, it's a lot easier for them to kind of, like, track their calories. Um, as far as, like, macro breakdown, if I don't know anything about anyone, I usually promote what I say is, like, 30, 30, 40. So getting 30% of your calories from protein, 30% from fat, and then 40% from carbs. That
Okay.
tends to work well with people. Um,
Okay.
but again, you can switch that too. Protein, I like the higher amount. Carbs, you can, we usually use that and change the carbs if we want to like gain weight or lose weight. But 30, 30, 40 is a good spot to start with and then go from there.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We can answer one more last question from Teshome and we can go. So let's see what he has to say.
Yes. You,
Teshome, can you ask your question?
the phone. Yes.
Thank you. Presentation today. Of course, I have a question about the health. So you said about nutrition, health, and exercise. There is any relation between the first three observations? At least the response of that such question. The health, nutrition, and the calorie. What is the relation between each of them? Thank you for your response.
What was that again? I'm having trouble hearing you. Can you repeat? Can you say that one more time? Yeah, I'm having. I can't hear you.
We can see you. Garett, can you share your email so they can ask your questions by email?
Yep. Yeah. Right here. Can you see my board? PanguFitness1@gmail.com. Someone said, does fasting work? So fasting can work. It doesn't work the way people think it works. Fasting basically, it's basically when you don't eat, right? Generally for like day or intermittent fasting. How it works is strictly because people eat less, right? If you can only eat 6 hours a day, you're not going to eat as much because you just don't have the time. But other than that, there's no intrinsic value of fasting. For some overweight individuals, it can improve, blood sugar levels. It can decrease blood sugar levels, things of that nature. There are some other possible health benefits from it. But when it comes to talking strictly about fat loss, the primary mechanism is it causes people to eat less than they normally would. With that said, I do find it's very effective for a lot of people. Again, just because it gives them those boundaries. Say if you're doing intermittent fasting, you say, I can only eat between 12 p.m. and 6 p.m. Those boundaries can be very powerful for a lot of people. and that can prevent them from eating. And so while on the physiological level, it doesn't have any intrinsic benefits really for fat loss, I do think it can be beneficial, strictly because it can help people adhere to a caloric deficit easier, if that makes sense. I've used it. I've actually used it before. I do it quite regular. I'll do it for a little bit, then I'll stop. It can also improve the way our body uses fat for fuel, which we didn't really get into that too much tonight. But I do think it's useful though. I do think it's useful.
Thank you, Garrett. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. Remember, we have a class at the same time every day, so please take care. Bye bye.
Can you see my email?